Welcome back. Today we're doing a deep dive into the power of eminent domain. Specifically, the claim that this U.S. government power-taking private property for public use was systematically weaponized after World War II.
Right. And to really get how that happened, you have to look at two critical federal acts working together. First, you needed the legal tool, which was Title I of the Housing Act of 1949. That's the slum clearance part.
Okay.
And second, you needed the money, the massive funding, which came from the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, for the interstate system.
So the law and the cash.
Exactly. Those two together gave cities the power and the means for, what some sources call the calculated destruction of black communities. Think Detroit's Black Bottom, St. Paul's Rondo places with real generational wealth being built up.
And the justification for all this taking was blight, right? That seems key. But the sources just this idea of public benefit was flimsy.
Very flimsy. Blight was incredibly subjective. Scholars point out it was often, quote, invented. And where was it most often invented? Overwhelmingly, as one source puts it, where black people lived. And here's the really insidious part. It wasn't just about taking land, it was about taking cheap land. Practices like redlining and just plain municipal neglect had already artificially pushed down property values in black neighborhoods for decades.
So they created the vulnerability first.
In a way, yes. Decades of disinvestment created that condition. Then eminent domain comes along, weaponizing this externally imposed low value. Developers and cities could grab huge areas for redevelopment very profitably.
Okay, so it wasn't just neglect followed by opportunity. There was intent in the routing, too. Our sources talk about highways I-81, I-94, I-95 being deliberately planned right through the heart of black neighborhoods.
Absolutely. The routing is undeniable in many cases. Look at I-81 in Syracuse, New York. It wasn't accidental. It was built directly through the 15th Ward.
And that was the core black community.
Almost 90% of the city's black population lived there. Building the highway right through it essentially decapitated the community, cut it off from downtown.
Wow. Okay, so let's talk about the economic hit. It wasn't just losing a house here or there.
No, it was comprehensive. Urban renewal, as the sources say, took entire black communities and black business districts. Complete economic ecosystems, often thriving against the odds, just wiped out.
And the promise of just compensation in the Fifth Amendment, how did that play out?
It largely failed black property owners. Local authorities consistently offered compensation well below market rate. It was systemic.
Below market? And what about renters? There must have been many renters.
A huge portion. And often they were offered, quote, nothing at all. Imagine your home is condemned, taken for a highway or a project, and you get zero financial help to relocate.
That's devastating. And adding insult to injury, they didn't even build enough replacement housing, did they?
Not even close. The data shows urban renewal programs replaced only about 2% of the housing units they destroyed. So it massively worsened the housing crisis for the very people being displaced.
Okay, let's put some hard numbers on this. The scale. Between 1949 and 1973, these federally funded projects displaced roughly 1 million people. That's huge.
1 million people, yeah.
And the racial disparity.
That's where it becomes just staggering. Of that million, 2/3, around 67% were African American.
2/3. So black Americans were displaced at, 5 times their rate in the overall population?
That's the estimate. 5 times more likely. It wasn't random. It was targeted displacement on a massive scale. It points to a system. Structural racism embedded in policy. You had city planners, legislators, even judges who gave enormous deference to these land seizure claims, all working within a framework that facilitated this outcome. It exploited existing vulnerability for essentially economic redistribution upwards.
Which means the way our cities look today, the highways dividing neighborhoods, the persistent wealth gaps, a lot of that isn't accidental. It's a direct result. You can trace it back to these specific calculated land takings.
Precisely. The geography of inequality we see now was engineered through these policies.
So where does that leave us, thinking about policy today?
If you accept this history, then you have to start thinking about addressing the original taking. That means exploring specific mechanisms to calculate and compensate for the monetary losses from what our sources term unjust property takings. That's the question we're left with.